Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my listeners, wherever you are watching me from, in all parts of the world, whether in North America, South America, whether from Africa or Europe or the Middle East and Asian countries and the Far Eastern countries and Australia. You are welcome to this channel. I'm highly delighted to present this channel which focuses on African science and technology review. What is the target of this channel? What do we intend to achieve by creating this channel? What is this channel all about? In this particular episode, we are going to share with you some tidbits on some of the things we will be discussing and sharing on this channel. We encourage you to always hear your views. Let us have your comments. And we believe that your comments will really be very helpful to us. As I said earlier, this channel is on African Science and Tech Review. What do we mean by African Science and Tech Review? In this channel, we intend to look at all activities, issues, and phenomena in the literal sense of it, which affect humans generally. We are going to have excursion into the physical realm and into the metaphysical, or otherwise called spiritual realm. We have noted that there is unity in nature. So when you talk about physical realm, you talk about spiritual realm, there's actually a link between the two. And this channel, we are going to examine the links, and that we are going to share from our own personal perspective our research of several decades, our experience, what we have been able to experience in life, the knowledge gathered through formal education and through informal education. We are going to put all this together to present a holistic view of the entire universe. A view that every human will have some confidence that, yes, I quite understand the workings of the universe as they affect me personally, as they affect my family, as they affect the society. And that some of the things that I know, I can actually defend them. So essentially, this channel relates to science, to theology, and to philosophy. Normally, or in classical terms, these three distinct knowledge bases are studied separately in institutions of learning. Let us pick science for instance. Science itself is an inquiry into nature via experiments. And over the years, science have broken into so many areas. You can talk about physical sciences, you can talk about behavioral or biological sciences, and so on and so forth. And of course, right from the time of creation, right from the time human beings have been making excursions into knowledge, the time of Aristotle and so on, all these various aspects of knowledge, they were actually under what was called the natural philosophy. But with time and the need for specialization, there have been several branches of this natural philosophy. So you can talk about science, and science itself has so many areas. Just like I said, you can talk about physical sciences, when you talk about physics, when you talk about mathematics, and so on and so forth. You can talk about biological sciences when you talk about microbiology, and so on and so forth, biochemistry, and so on and so forth. And of course, when we talk about science, technology is already embedded in it because science actually brought about technology. And you cannot do technology without science. And that is why even in curriculum of institutions, even if you are studying engineering, technology, you still need to be abreast with the foundation of science, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, and so on and so forth. So that is science generally. Then we want to talk about theology. Don't forget, our channel will be making excursions into science, scientific areas, theological areas, and philosophical areas, and we are going to present a synthesis of all this without any bias, without not necessarily taking into consideration one's professed view on religion. We have been considering the three big knowledge bases upon which we can say the entire universe rests. That is science, theology, and philosophy. We just mentioned science as one of the three pillars of the knowledge basis. Of course, we are presenting some of the introductory parts relating to this channel. And this episode, we are introducing African Science and Tech Review and presenting some preliminaries. So science, theology, and philosophy, they are the three knowledge bases. We just mentioned science and giving some glimpses into what science is. Of course, science relates to experiments and facts. Theology is on its part, is the study of God, or if you want to extend it, since God is invisible, the study of what is known as supernatural beings, invisible beings. And it looks from the perspective of general discussion. And the underlying principle in theology is faith. I believe this works, another person believes this, another person believes it. So as many theocratic systems that we have, we also have so many theocratic beliefs. You can talk about Christianity, you can talk about Islam, you can talk about African traditional religion, you can talk about the Eastern religion and the Western religion. Even within each of these basic broad areas of theocratic systems, you still have different perspectives, different beliefs, different depending on culture, history, and so many other things. But generally, theology talks about the study of God, the study of invisible beings, and the underlying principle is faith. If I say I believe something, you can't necessarily challenge me. Somebody can say, I believe that God exists. Another person can say, I don't believe God exists. And so on and so forth. And that's where we now come to philosophy. Philosophy can be said to lie between science and theology in the sense that philosophy now tries to justify whatsoever we believe in. If you say you believe in something, can you establish it based on principles of logic? Because philosophy talks about logic, and what philosophy says in general is that there is no truth and no falsity. Something may be true based on your own facts, it will not be true based on another person's facts. So it depends on our orientation. So it's now, the onus now lies on someone who is establishing his theocratic claim or scientific claim to show that this is it. This is why I believe in this. Science will not give much problem because science on its own is established based on experiment. You have to prove it. If I say 2 plus 2, we know it is 4. and it can actually be justified. We mentioned briefly some of the arguments with respect to science, how you can establish facts with respect to science. You can talk about deduction, for instance. You can talk about mathematical principles of induction when you talk about numbers. You can talk about principles, the principle of contradiction, and so on and so forth. Then we now move from there. This channel, we now, like we said, we are going to look at all these various knowledge bases from so many perspectives, with focus on the African perspective. But we know that the African perspective is not an isolation with respect to the global perspective. And even within a particular perspective, you know that there could be some dilution because of interaction over so many years, like Africans were colonized, and some of the practices could have been changed one way or the other. And of course, apart from examining the scientific basis, the philosophical basis and theological basis of our beliefs, and then looking at it from African perspective. And of course, when you talk about African perspective, it's not a single thing per se. Within Africa, you can talk about West Africa, and within West Africa, you still have many countries. Within each country, you have many tribes. Within each tribe, you still have so many beliefs. The same thing applies to North Africa, to East Africa, Southern Africa, and so on and so forth. So when you talk about knowledge, actually, which this channel is all about, when we say from the African perspective, we are just looking at it the way a typical African will look at it. And the way a typical African will look at it will not be so far-fetched from the way other persons living in different parts of the world will look at it. You can talk about the perspective from the Oriental religions, from China, Japan, India, and so on and so forth, based on their culture, based on their religion. Talk about Buddhism, you talk about Hinduism, talk about Taoism, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Western perspective, with respect to the Occidental perspective, you can talk about the views of the Italians, the Greeks, and so on and so forth. And of course, we know that when you talk about the origin of many of these religions, especially the Abrahamic religions, the Christianity, and Islam, you trace everything around Africa and the Middle East. So in general, in this our channel, we are going to be looking at all issues pertaining to man and existence. And we are going to see how we can use the knowledge of science, the knowledge of theology, and the knowledge of philosophy to interpret them. Not necessarily how people want to believe, what they want to believe, but we are going to use some of the principles that have been established in all these three knowledge bases. The principles of science, the principles of theology, and the principles of philosophy. Whether we talk about African perspective or non-African perspective, the first thing remains that no perspective can actually be ignored. And no perspective is actually totally wrong. What we know is that some of the beliefs may not be welcome in other perspectives, and some will be common to all the perspectives, and so on and so forth. So this channel, in summary, we are going to look at everything together as a human being, because wherever we reside in the universe depends on so many factors, and one could have resided in any other part of the world. One could have embraced any religion. One could have embraced any philosophical concept, perspective. It depends on parental background and so many other things. So we want to see knowledge as a unison. We want to see your knowledge as something that is universal. And that's why we talk about universal truths, and which is what this channel will be looking into. We want to assure you that you are going to have a good time with this channel. Of course, we welcome your comments, we welcome your suggestions. I hope you have enjoyed this channel. If you have, please kindly like, share, and subscribe to this channel. In so doing, you will encourage us to post new videos. You also give the opportunity to others to watch the videos. Please note that your comments, questions, and remarks are welcome at any time. We will ensure as much as possible we will try as much as possible to answer your questions and provide the necessary information that you need. Kindly be reminded that this is not a purely religious or ethnic channel. We don't promote directly any religion. We don't promote directly any ethnic group. We don't promote directly any opinion that is not universal. Any opinion that is just limited to a particular club or sect or organization. This is an intellectual channel, and we tend to look for what can be called the universal truth. Truth that is based on fairness, on justice, on facts, and not just on fiction or personal beliefs. Thank you very much.